I want to welcome everybody back. I know some of you have been here before. It's awesome to see you. And I think we may have a few first-time people here tonight. So tonight, again, we have a lot to get through. And we're basically at the fourth workshop of this program. And I'm excited to talk about it because it's something that I feel like is more important than ever as we look at what's going on in the world and kind of where a lot of people are. And it's the subject of, retirement planning. It's the subject of this world of, most people, they don't have a good plan and they hope to be able to retire. And that may not work out for everybody. So I'm going to share my screen here if you get me started. If you have a workbook, by the way, let me move this video out of my way here. Stand by, you guys. Let me just do some configuring here. I'm supposed to make my video. Okay. If you have a workbook or a PDF of that book, if not, try to take notes, try to follow along. In the workbook, we're going to go to page 67. And again, there will be a page number on the screen if we're in the book. So we're going to jump into it, and I'm going to click through all the sign-in stuff and all that stuff so we can really get to the content of tonight. So page 67, at the very top, we're going to get going. Number one, very important. What sources of income will you have in retirement? Where will the money come from? It's a really long vacation. You should be planning for it. You got to be saving for it. So we're going to look at where the money's going to come from. We're also going to talk about some differences in some strategies with what they call fixed, indexed, and variable, what's called annuities. There's products out there that a lot of people, especially as they're thinking about retirement, they typically use what's called an annuity product because of guarantees and things with income and things like that. So we're going to break that down in a basic level. We're also going to talk about IRAs and retirement plans and give you some basic, gist of the mechanics of those. And so you can maybe say, hey, am I really doing the right thing here with my situation? We're also going to bring up the subject of long-term care, super scary stuff. I don't want to depress you tonight, but there might be some depressing stuff towards the end. So I don't want to do that. But we're going to talk about what's the plan. We're also going to say, does Medicare cover all of my costs? I know Leslie and myself had a Zoom call today with a woman in, I believe in Illinois. And, it's really depressing when people realize, what do you mean Medicare is not going to cover all of my costs? Like, it's really sad for people. So hopefully we can help people understand this better. Also, we're going to end with the subject of what's called estate planning. That's not only for wealthy people. You don't need to have a lot of money to have a plan. You need to have a plan. This is super important stuff. So we're going to bring up those subjects as we go. Okay. So the good news is, you guys, we have good news to get started. There is, by the way, there's a lot of great news in the world. Maybe turn off the television or whatever and just look around. There's a lot of great news in the world. But in this context, there is some good news. And here's what it is. We're living longer. Technology, medicine, things like this, they're saying it's getting better. Again, according to the Wall Street Journal, if you're 65 years and old, you're 65 today, they are projecting the average life expectancy to be 86.6 for men. And I always ask, do you think the men or the women live longer or die first? And the answer is usually pretty right. The women live longer, 88.8. I won't comment as to why I think the men die earlier. I'll let you try to figure that one out, but you can put your mind to that one. Here's the bad news, you guys. Most people are not saving enough for retirement. They're not saving enough. They live in fantasy land with all these debt payments of $500, $600. I don't know what the average car payment. I think it's about $500 a month right now. The average car payment, $500. Is the average person saving $500? And some people say they're not even close to it. So it's a problem. So in the reality, the screen says the retirement has less to do with age 65. It has everything to do with the money you have saved. So there's a notion, there's a mindset, there's a paradigm. And, my parents taught me this and they were dead wrong. And I love them to death, but they were wrong. They said, you go to school, you get a job, you get a degree, you work for a good company, you save money, you climb the corporate ladder, you collect a gold wristwatch, and you retire at 65. And I said, well, wait a minute, that doesn't exist anymore. That was, I don't know, that was maybe 50 years ago that existed. So it has nothing to do with how old you are. Age is not relevant in the equation necessarily. Depending on how you're doing it, it has more to do with how much money you have set aside. So that's going to be kind of the context of what we're going to talk about. By the way, this part of the workshop, it's a little broken down. It's not going to work out properly if you're filling in the book just because of the way that they did the lines. But I want you to get the gist of it. This is the average sources of income for someone 65 and older, according to the Employee Benefit Research Institute, who does all this research. And here's the breakdown. 38% of their income comes from Social Security. By the way, do you know anything about Social Security? You should write down the web address, ssa.gov, socialsecurityadministration.gov. Go on there, set up a free login password, because they're not going to mail you that document anymore. It costs too much money to mail out 300 million pieces of paper. So you need to get that from the internet and you need to review it. It's 38% of the average person's income. That's a huge chunk. 18.4 is pensions, IRAs, 401ks, and annuities. It's a lot less than people think. And I want you to maybe put your mind to this thought. If you have a pension today, should you be nervous about it? And I don't want to put fear in anybody's mind. That's not my purpose. But I just look at what's going on with the government, with the state, with corporations, with all of these organizations who have to keep paying these pensions. They're looking at getting rid of them and trimming them back. And so 18.4 only. 10.7% income from assets. You know, what could be a good example of that? There's actually quite a few, but one primary example people can think about is, hey, maybe you have, maybe you own real estate. You own a piece of property and you rent it out. Maybe that generates a cash flow for you. I tell you, when I was 21 years old, because of this information, and some people kind of saying, Rob, you got to do it. I was kind of talked into buying a house when I was 21 years old. And I look back now and I go, man, I'm really glad I did that, because it's a rental and it brings me cash flow. And so it's a blessing to really learn how to do that. Check out the 30.1%, you guys, earnings, which means a lot of people are still working at 65. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. However, if that's not your plan and you're forced to do it because you don't have enough money, there is something wrong with that. And we should talk about it. So, working is not a bad thing, but if it wasn't part of your plan and you're forced to do it, it's a bad thing. And you'll notice at the top, it says 2.8%. What does that represent? Charity, donations, assistance, family members, things like that. And so the one thing I would ask you to do in the workbook is on that page, it says, what are your sources of income for retirement? I would love for you to think about that as we go through this tonight. Do you know what you're going to have? Not your spouse, not any of those things. Do you know what you're going to have? Do you know what your Social Security is going to look like? Because if you rely exclusively on your spouse, that's awesome. But what if something happens to them and now you're left in the total darkness? We don't want to do that. How much can you rely on these things? Especially we see the stock market, a lot of volatility right now, unemployment, 30 plus million, taxes are on the rise, inflation's on the rise. This is going to creep at us. And so we don't know what's going on with our money. We got to look at these things. Do we have other savings? Obviously, many people are touching their home equity and whatnot. And so at the end of the day, just having some thoughts here is what I challenge you to do, and maybe write those down on page 68. Okay. So the retirement crisis, it says, has the traditional 401k failed us? By the way, you should do some research on this stuff. And it's not on the PowerPoint, but the gentleman's name is Ted Benna, who created the 401k in 1978 and implemented that plan for the first time in 1979, when income taxes in America were very high income taxes. So they looked at a plan in the tax code called 401k where they could defer the taxes because they were high in the late 70s to the future where they thought they would be lower. Well, today we're at a near almost historical low, pretty close from an income tax perspective. And we have a lot of problems. And so we're looking at the problems with 401k and taxes. It says, do workers have enough to retire? Here's the averages. As of January of this year, ages 40 to 49, the average is 102,000, but the median is 36. By the way, if you're like me, for a minute, I didn't know what the difference of the two was. The median is the midpoint, which means 50% of the people have less than 36,000. The average may be 102, but 50% of the people have less than 36,000. That's a problem. It's a big time problem. Again, think of this as we go. How many things have you put money into in the past 5 years that have gone up in value? Most people spend all their money on things that go down in value. This is a problem, 36,000. 50 to 59, The median level, about 61,000. Half of the people in their 50s have less than this. This is a crisis. This is a crisis that is going to affect all of our families, and it's a reality check. 60 to 69, the numbers are not much better. So what we need to realize is there's a real problem here, and we've got to do something about it. This is a crisis for most people. So it says you need about $1 million to retire. I don't want to discourage you with that or depress you. Or some people say, oh, yep, here we go. You may never get there, but something is better than nothing. Some effort is better than no effort. And so here's some of the things we talked about in workshop 2. The formula 10-20, if you remember this, it says it's recommended to have a goal of 20 times your current income to have enough for retirement. So it's even the workbook here. It says if your current income is $60,000, how much would you need? Well, according to that, that's $1.2 million. And again, some people say, yeah, right. I don't know anybody with 1.2. I'm aware of that. I do know a lot of people who do have that kind of money. And sometimes it's a little disturbing because you realize there's a lot more than you may think. Because I used to think not a lot of people do. And then I started getting disturbed as I started really looking and saying, wow, some of these people who are a lot younger than me have saved a lot of money and done a lot of this stuff. The idea is self-security instead of social security. The government is going to do their part, but the government is not designed for you to be able to retire. Social security was designed as a supplement for your personal savings. Okay. So again, we would like you to think about that stuff on the bottom of page 68. So I know personally my background of being an airplane mechanic, I would look at some of the terminology on the screen and this stuff, it was like a foreign language to me. I go, what the heck do they mean 401k, 403b? What is that? What's an IRA, Roth IRA? What the heck does that mean? I mean, literally, that's where I was, and it was very frustrating for me. And so hopefully the next few minutes we can spend some time and just give you some basics on these so you get a little bit closer to maybe having a better understanding. And we're going to start with what's called an IRA, a traditional versus a Roth. By the way, what does IRA stand for? Individual retirement account. Some people have some other terminology. It's individual retirement account. The difference, there was a traditional account, and then there was a senator named William Roth who said, we want to give a benefit to the American people, and they named it after him. And here's the difference on page 69. The traditional IRA, you get some deductions. So let's say I save $1,000 this year into a traditional IRA, and I make $50,000 at my job. Well, according to that, I would only pay tax on $49,000 because I would get to deduct it with that tax deduction. So that's a benefit for a lot of people. The Roth IRA, on the other hand, no deduction. I put $1,000 in that Roth, I make $50K, I pay tax on $50K or whatever your income is. Okay, so let's see how this turns out. What's called required minimum distributions. These have been waived for this year because of the pandemic, coronavirus crisis. But there's a thing called the RMD, required minimum distribution, and it is 72 years old. So what happens is this. You win the lottery, you make a great business, whatever it is, and maybe you don't need the money from your IRA. By 70 and a half, the IRS puts a gun to your head and they go, hey, Michael, you're going to take that money. And here's why. Because if you don't, the penalty is 50% of what you're supposed to take. So you're going to lose half of what we would force you to take. Nobody's going to do that because the only time they can tax it is when you take it out. So I want you to think about that. The Roth IRA, no requirement. They don't care. You can do what you want to do. You don't need to touch your money. A little bit more flexibility. The earnings, however, again, the traditional, all of that money, because it was what's called tax later, tax deferred. It's taxed at withdrawal. This is the farmer who did not want to pay tax on the seed. He wanted to pay tax on the harvest. And I'm not saying it's good or bad, but you got to really think about that. That could be a lot of tax. You save $1 million in your 401k, how much can you take out? Because you cannot get $1 million. You cannot get 900,000. You can't even get 800,000 because you owe the federal and state government income tax. Big time point. The Roth IRA, it is not taxed unless you take it early, which is defined, by the way, I know this is a lot of information, but this is defined by the age of 59 and a half years old. If you take money from those plans early, there's a penalty. This year, again, they're waiving that penalty, but you shouldn't be touching that money unless it's a real crisis, okay? So this is what's called tax deferred versus tax advantaged. tax later versus tax never. Again, I'm not a tax advisor. I feel like I know enough. But at the end of the day, one of the problems that the average household has, out of 100 households, you guys, 90 of them have a problem that the majority of their retirement money is in tax deferred accounts. And the federal government is going to determine those tax rates in the future when they have a big time debt problem and all this stuff. So a big time tax concept of tax deferred versus tax advantage, okay? So bear with me tonight because I know it's a lot of info. So there are two primary types of plans in the world, okay? Really, one of them is the dinosaur, but the two are what's called a defined benefit and a defined contribution. So think about the words, okay? If it's a benefit plan, it says it's a traditional pension on the left-hand side of the screen. So it makes sense. A benefit is something it sounds like the company is going to give that to me. They're going to give me a benefit, a pension. That's the old school way. A contribution plan, let me think, the word contribution, if I'm going to a Memorial Day barbecue, which I'm not, but if I was, and they said, hey, make a contribution, that would mean I would have to put in on the food, on the beer, whatever. That means I put into that plan. That's the easiest way that I understand that. So again, the pension paid for by the company, it's extremely expensive because they got to pay you even when you don't work there anymore, and they don't want to do that anymore. If you don't believe me, reach out to some teachers in California a few years ago because many of them had a drastic reduction in their pension, 30, 40%, some of them. So very costly. And you will receive a set payout. So for example, you maybe are a school teacher. They say, hey, once you get to a certain point, you accumulate this so much time of service, here's a set payout, $2,000, $3,000 a month. It's a great benefit. It's a great benefit. A lot of us don't have that. Most of us are on the right side. It's paid for by who? You and I, okay? The employee, the worker, the person trying to accumulate. Some employers are matching, and we're witnessing because of the pandemic, many matching contributions have been suspended. A lot of companies I've talked to, they've gotten rid of that right now. They just say we can't afford it. So that could be a problem. And the amount you're going to have, you guys, is going to be defined by how much you put in. So if you don't want to take a nice vacation, you don't need to save a lot. But I'm here to give you some data, facts, okay? As a friend who's on the earth, the spinning earth at the same time you are, the average retirement is 8,000 days long. I want you to picture an 8,000-day vacation and what it costs to eat alone for one person for 8,000 days. And you'll be like, well, that's a lot of money. Things are costing more. We're living longer. This is scary stuff. So we've got to take initiative and get on track with our budgeting and our debt and our savings and all this stuff so we can have more when we get to that point of life, okay? So we're going to talk about what's called qualified plans. And there's kind of a variety of these things. You'll notice it's numbers and letters. It's interesting because those are lines from the tax code. Line 401, subsection K. Line 403, subsection B. Here's what it says. A 401k, retirement plan, sponsored by an employer. A 403b is effectively the same thing, you guys. It's the same thing, except it's for tax-exempt organizations. So if you're a school teacher, you may be contributing to a plan that looks like a 401k, but it's called a 403b, but they're the same thing. They are the same thing. Don't let that confuse you. They're the same thing. A 457 is a qualified plan available to state, local governments. If you work for the city, the county, this is often referred to as what's called deferred comp. Many people I've spoke to, I have a deferred comp plan at the city. It's typically what's called a 457 plan. So again, you don't necessarily need to know that, but that might be helpful. And you know what, you guys, let's go to the workbook because I don't want to get too far off track on the workbook if you are following along. Really quick on page 69, there is some true-false question. I just want to make sure we get that, okay? It says in 401k plan, you will receive a fixed payout in retirement. That's false. That's going to vary depending upon what you have. Pension plans are a defined contribution plan. That's also false. That would be a defined benefit plan. Your company is required to contribute to your defined contribution plan. That means they're required to match that 401k. Nope, that's also false. Pension plans are growing more popular. We should all laugh out loud. That is definitely not true. That's false. Update your workbook. It should say in 2020, if you are 52 years old, your maximum IRA contribution is $7,000, not $6,500, and that would be true. We want to make sure you have the most up-to-date stuff. And also, we didn't talk about it yet, but it says a catch-up contribution is an increased contribution for younger workers. It's for older workers trying to play catch-up. So we will talk about that. I just didn't want to miss those as we go. So there's some advantages of these plans, you guys, what's called salary deduction plans through our payroll, through our job, very big time benefit. Here's some of them. Tax advantages. Again, tax deferred earnings. The money's going in pre-tax. So let's say you invest $100. Well, you don't have to pay the tax on the $100. So if you had to pay the tax, you could only really invest like 80. So there's a tax advantage there of the money going in. There is some advantage to that. Probably the biggest one that I love is what's called auto deduction. Auto pay, your payroll goes and you save money. Because if you have to think about saving money and do it consciously, most people are not going to do it. We are our own worst enemy. And so auto deduction, automate your savings is one of the best things you can do. You shouldn't have to think about it. Make it automatic, okay? Another advantage, matching. If you have a match available at your employer, I would tell you guys there's something to remember in this order, and it's not in the workshop, but you should know this. Free money, matching money, free money, tax-free money, followed by taxable money. I'll say it again. Free money, followed by tax-free money, followed by taxable money. That should be the order of participation, okay? Very important because most people do that wrong. And also portability. When you leave the job, the benefit, you can roll that over. Do not take a distribution. You want to do a rollover. Otherwise, you pay potential penalties, taxes, things like that. We don't want to do that. Okay. We're going to very quickly, talk about small business retirement plans because some of you may have access or may have heard of some of these. The two most popular on the screen, what's called a simple IRA and a SEP IRA. A simple, again, is a small business. So let's say you run a landscaping company with 5 people, 10 people, 20 people, 50 people. Some people say, I want to set up a 401k for my business. No, you don't. You want to set up a simple IRA because it's way more cost effective for small businesses. If you're a giant business, yeah, you probably need a 401k. But a small business plan called a simple IRA, it's a great plan. Again, the employee can put up to $13,500 with a $3,000 catch up if they're 50 years or older. So that's a lot of money, $16,500 a year people can save. A SEP IRA, this is like a real estate agent. This is like a business owner. This is like, a lot of people who work for themselves. They're self-employed. They're an independent contractor. They may not have access to an employer-sponsored plan. It's funded by the self-employed, and employees cannot contribute to these. So it's interesting, if a self-employed person has an employee, the self-employed person can contribute to that plan for the employee, but the employee cannot. It's just a rule of the IRS. But what you need to know is that there's plans available. What we find is hairdressers, real estate agents, insurance agents, financial agents, all sorts of people in that world, CPAs, whatnot, small business people, they normally don't set up something because it's not offered through their employer, and they often don't do this right. So it's really important to know. A Keogh plan is, again, for self-employed or unincorporated businesses. It's a lot more difficult to administer, so you really won't see a lot of these. However, people can save up to $57,000 a year into those plans. So again, using to know for small businesses, there's things out there. We want to make sure your book is updated. If you're not taking notes on your book, maybe you can just write down the 2020 numbers on the screen here, because we want people to know what the numbers are. If you have a job, if you want to put money into an IRA, so on and so forth. We want you to know what those are, because typically every couple of years, they will slightly go up a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to pause for 30 seconds and sip some water. Maybe you're writing that down, maybe you're not. It's a tough job giving these workshops, I tell you. So hopefully you guys are hanging in. I know this is a lot of information. So, so these are some of the numbers, okay? On the following page, actually, hang on, it says complete the exercise. Make sure we didn't miss it. We've already done those true false, okay? On the next page of 71, again, this is a reference guide for you. You may have a friend, a family member who's leaving a company. They have a plan and they say, hey, can I roll over this into that? Can I put my 401k into a Roth IRA, for example? There are a lot of rules. And by the way, you guys, this is a general form. The government is making a lot of changes right now. And so the one thing I would say is use this as a reference if you need it. But again, the IRS is making a lot of changes, and so please don't take this as the gospel, because they are making a lot of changes right now that we need to be aware of. And so just for you to have it as a little reference in the book there. Okay, so let's go to the top of page 72. And we're going to answer these questions, and then we're going to get to the benefits of a rollover, what's called IRA, when you roll it from one account to the other. So the top of page 72, it says employees of public schools, universities, and hospitals, those organizations can participate in what? The answer is 403B, because it's for tax exempt. Can a federal employee participate in a 457 plan? That is yes. Can an employee make contributions to a SEP IRA? That is no. And can an employee make a contribution to a simple IRA? That is yes. Again, I know that seems complicated. We don't expect you to be a guru, just some basic stuff, okay? But there's benefits of when you have an IRA, of doing what's called a rollover, okay? 4 primary ones. Number 1, you can continue the tax deferral. You have a job, you just lost your job. You have money in that account, you're tempted to take that money out. If you take the money out, you got to pay tax. And I know because of the situation, they're going to allow you to defer it for 3 years, but you got to pay the tax. If you don't take it out, you do a rollover, you can continue the tax deferral. So that tax is not owed yet. That might be a benefit for you. This is a huge one. You can usually increase your investment options. 401ks, IRAs typically tend to be very limited in their investment options. I ask people, hey, how did you pick these investments? And they go, there's only 3 or 4 to choose from, 10 to choose from. I go, oh my gosh, that's not good. You need to have a lot to choose from. So we like people having a lot of choices. Potentially lowering the fees, I like that. I'm not necessarily against paying a fee if I'm getting value for it. But if it's a really high fee and I'm not getting anything, what the heck? A lot of people don't know. We got to look at that. And also simplification. We meet people, I've met people, they've got accounts all over the place, 5,000, 10,000, 2,000, and people forget about them. And then something happens to people, and then literally that money gets lost into the lost money property fund or whatever that thing is called. And it does exist, you guys, because I've had clients that's happened to. And so we want people to ultimately control their money, okay? So let's look at the workbook on page 72, and we'll do that little rollover chart real quick. It says, can you roll over a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA? The answer is yes. What about a Roth to a traditional? It says no, and for the technical purposes, it's no, okay? There are some exceptions to this. Can you roll over a simple IRA to a SEP IRA? It says yes, after 2 years. And can you roll over a SEP into a simple? It says you cannot. So again, you may not need to know that, but maybe that's helpful, who knows? So let's talk about what's called an annuity. And an annuity, it took me a long time to really understand it. You ever see somebody who wins the lottery or something like this, and they win, $20 million, and they go, okay, I don't want all that money because I got to pay all that tax. And so what happens is they say, give me a payout for the next 20 years, the next 50 years, whatever it is. That is an annuity. They put the big money in a pot, and it pays out a monthly or annual amount. So in a technical sense, it's the opposite of life insurance. So on the screen, it says in life insurance, if you die, your family benefits, you pay a small payment. Think about it. Life insurance, you pay a small payment. Something goes wrong, the insurance company pays a big payment. An annuity is the opposite. Typically up front, you deposit a big payment, a rollover, and a 401k, an IRA, something like that. And then in return, you get maybe a monthly check and whatever. If you set it up the right way, you could get it for the rest of your life without losing control. So it's a really big thing for people to learn, because we need to have a guaranteed stream of income when we retire. Most people's retirement income right now, if they look into the future, outside of their Social Security, it's a question mark. They do not know what they're going to get, and it's not predictable with any sort of guarantee. So we feel like people need some guarantees. There are 3 types of annuities, 3 types of investments in reality. It's a very simple concept. Fixed, indexed, and variable. Okay? And if you think of those words, they're very simple to understand. And it depends on the investment choice. And so a fixed annuity, very simple, it gives you a fixed rate of interest. Your bank account is a fixed account. Guaranteed rate of interest, by the way, it's not very good. You should look at those rates. They're not very good. They're very low. But that's a fixed annuity. An index annuity essentially looks at a stock market index. And if that index goes up, your account goes up. However, if that index goes down, because it's what's called an indexed account, your account does not go down. There's like a safety net in place. Probably the most popular thing people are doing for 10, 15 years now, we've seen indexed products. Variable is just like it sounds. Variable, big question mark. It's going to depend on what you choose, how your investment performs. Maybe you make money, maybe you lose money. That depends on you and how you have that set up. So it's important to understand, okay? By the way, there's some questions in the book. We're going to do it on the bottom page 72. I want to get it just before we miss it because we never really talk about it. And it says the S&P 500, which is another stock market index, which is on the screen, may better reflect the U.S. economy than the Dow Jones, which is another stock market index that we look at in this country, because A says, well, because the 500 tracks 500 companies versus 30, that's actually true. B says, because 500 represents a greater cross-section of the economy, that's also true. So the answer is all of the above. Most people, when they look at, hey, how is the stock market doing? They are looking at what's called the S&P 500. I just recommend maybe you Google that, S&P 500. If you have an iPhone, it's built into the iPhone. I mean, literally, it's so common. It's the most common index that people use, okay? So in annuities, there are phases. Just like in life, there are a couple of phases. This is what's called accumulation and distribution. So let's think about it, you guys. If you're not retired right now, what phase are you in? Well, you're in the accumulation phase. You need to be saving. Inside of these annuity accounts, here's how it works. After tax money, no limit on what you can put in. That's how those lottery winners put, 20, 30 million, 50 million, whatever it is. They put big dollars in those things. All the money grows tax deferred. So it grows, it grows, it grows. You don't pay, you don't pay, you don't pay. You start to pay when you take the money out. The distribution of these is where it gets really unique. And I don't want this to confuse you. I'm going to do my best just to explain these ideas. You could say, A, give me a lump sum. So I've accumulated money. I'm now ready to distribute my money and take my money. A, lump sum, send me a big check. I don't recommend it because you have a big tax problem in that situation. That's one way. Another way is what's called lifetime income, where you could say, hey, I don't want to take a lump sum, but I do want money every month or every year for the rest of my life, even if I live a really long time. That's what most people like. They say, I want lifetime income because you can never outlive your money. Or you could say, pay it over a certain period of time, 5, 10, 20, 30 years. So obviously, if you take a 5-year payout, they're going to pay you a lot of money versus a 30-year payout. It would be less money monthly. So the point is there's options, you guys. There's joint options. There's options with survivorship on spouses and things like that. The one thing I would tell you is, again, today is you to get some tiny little nuggets. I don't want you to go making like life-changing decisions after this meeting. Ask questions. I mean, a lot of us who are on the call have licenses and we're trained. We know this stuff. But again, don't get too confused by that stuff. Some things to remember on annuities. It's taxed as ordinary income when you take the money out on that gain, okay? 59.5 apply. So if you take it early, there's a penalty. And a normal surrender charge, annuities have this. It's normal. It's not a bad thing. It's what's called a surrender charge, where there's a penalty if you close the account or take too much money early. Remember, you are your own worst enemy normally. We are our own worst enemy normally. So a normal thing is 5 to 7 years, sometimes even a year or two longer, but be very careful of something if it's 20 years or something like that. We've recently had a client who I believe she was in her mid 70s, a little bit older than my father, who had her money in an account that she couldn't touch for like 15 years. And it just didn't seem right to me. And so be very careful of something like that. Very common that people are buying those, and it may not be the best thing. Okay. So again, 10% penalty if you take it early. That's the IRS. Again, this year that is waived. So if you're in a predicament, you're not going to pay that, but normally you would. The IRS is going to make some assumptions here that the earnings, the interest is taken first. And I'll show you why in a second. Because you're going to pay taxes as ordinary income. And so here's an example. You have an account and it grows by $10,000, okay? It profits 10 grand. You say, hey, I want 5,000 of that. And let's say you're under 59 and a half. Here's the way the IRS, AKA the mafia, is going to stiff arm you. If you're in a 25% tax bracket, which is very low, and you pay a 10% penalty on the 5,000, so right off the bat, you're going to get $500 up. So you only receive 4,500, but here's the kicker. You pay tax on the initial amount, even though you don't get it. So the tax at a 25% tax rate is $1,250. The sum of those two is $1,750 to take out 5,000. So again, people have got to be very aware of this if they're taking money out, because many people, they're very naive and they just say, oh, I'll deal with it at tax time or whatever. It can be very costly. And it can set people back. And again, the last thing we want people having is an IRS problem or something like that, okay? So some advantages of rolling a 401k into an annuity. Let's say you leave that job. Hey, Rob, I've got a 401k. What do I do with it? Maybe an annuity is a good thing, and here's why. Guaranteed principal, maybe one of the most strongest points out of them all. You can pour concrete under that number when you put it into an annuity. So when someone leaves a job, a lot of people are concerned of losing money in a bad investment or something like that. Well, if you use the right sort of account, you can guarantee the number. That's a pretty good thing for a lot of families. Flexibility, again, potential to change your goals, depending on your situation. That's kind of a big thing. Maybe you should be in the market, maybe you shouldn't, depending on your situation. Again, income protection, because I've always said to people, you know, outside of what if you die too soon, but my real fear is what if you live too long? You know, what if you live till you're 97 years old and you thought I'd be dead when I'm 80? I mean, a lot of people experiencing that, and they're literally outliving their savings. And so it's a really serious thing for us to think about. And a death benefit protection. Again, money in an annuity, when you pass away, is paid as a death benefit. So there's some tax advantages with that for us to think about, okay? Let's go to the top of page 73 just to make sure I'm not missing anything in this workbook. And again, if you feel like I'm going fast, I sincerely apologize, but there's a lot for us to talk about. So I don't want to get run out of time here. Okay. Top of page 73. How much money can you put into an annuity? The answer is D. There's no limit, any amount you want. Contributions in annuities grow tax deferred, pay tax later. However, the distributions are taxable. You're going to pay tax. The investment performance, it says fixed and indexed. Those are guaranteed. Fixed and indexed, no risk. Can't lose money, so there's guarantees. Variable, just like the word is, no guarantee. We're not so sure about that. There's a big risk there, okay? The question under that, it says Bill is 58 years old and he's considered buying an annuity with a 10% interest rate bonus, free money, and a 10-year surrender charge. Should he buy it? We think the answer is, well, it depends, but the answer is C. Maybe he should find something with a shorter period, because if he's 58, maybe he can't get to it till he's 68. I don't know, that might be too long. And so we would say find something shorter in that situation. Okay, page 73, we're talking about what's called an immediate annuity. We kind of already did. Like I said, you win the lottery, you give a large lump sum of money to a company in exchange for a series of payments. I leave my job, here's my account. You can still get that account, don't get me wrong, but I want a payment. I want a guaranteed income stream. People like that strategy. The monthly check you're going to get is going to be determined by a few things. The size of your account, the rate of the interest, and how old you are. They're going to look at those things. And again, you can get money for all of your life, or for 20 years, or 5 years, or whatever your situation is. But one thing to think about is what's called survivorship. For spouses, military spouses, many of these pensions, you can get a monthly payout of, let's say, $2,000 with no survivorship for your spouse. Or you can get $1,800 a month with survivorship for your spouse. A lot of people, because they don't understand it, they go, oh, I want 2,000. What they don't realize is when they die, their spouse gets 0. So you got to think of survivorship if you have a spouse who relies on your income. Okay. All right. The bottom of page 73, a couple of questions real quick. It says Mary puts $200,000 into an annuity and it accumulates a $100,000 gain, resulting in a total value of $300,000. Mary decides to take out $150,000 at age 60. If she's in a 30% tax bracket, what is her tax liability? Well, 30% of $150,000 is $45,000 is the answer. That's a lot of tax to pay, so that may not be smart. Tony is 65 years old, and he wants to retire. He chooses lifetime income, so he's going to get it for life, with what's called 20 years period certain. So if he dies early, it's going to go for at least 20 years. That's what that means. If he dies at age 73, which is, let's see, 8 years into it, how long will his spouse continue to receive the payment? The answer is 12 years, because he got it with at least 20 years for sure. So sometimes the terminology we see is confusing. We have some individuals right now dealing with like state pensions and things like this. It's very confusing. And so again, sometimes maybe this terminology will be helpful for you. Okay. All right. We are not going through an example. We're going to jump right into long-term care, you guys. We're going to talk about long-term care, Medicare, estate planning. This is real stuff here. There's a good chance of this. Here's the numbers according to the long-term care ACL.gov site. 7 out of 10 over the age of 65 will require. So I can't see how many people are on the call right now because of my screen configuration, but that's 70% of us. 70 out of 100. That scares me. You know, our parents, our family members, things like that. The scary part is 4 out of 10 are between the ages of 18 and 64. So you don't have to be old. I have a personal testimony. I hurt my back several years ago. It woke me up in a major way because I go, oh my gosh, I'm having a hard time putting my own shoes on. So it's a real problem that we're all facing, this longevity problem. And so long-term care, I didn't mean to change the screen, but long-term care is really the strategy that people have in place to deal with this. So what is it? What is long-term care? Long-term care is the help that you get when you are not able to perform what they call the basic activities of daily living. And here is a list of what they call the 6 ADLs, activities of daily living. So essentially, you cannot do 2 out of the 6. Maybe you can't dress yourself. I'll tell you, a good friend of mine, very good friend of mine, sad story. He went through a couple of issues and he ended up slipping and falling while he was in Costco on like a wet floor. I don't think he sued them or anything like that, but he slipped and fell and he was in a sling. He was in a sling when he fell. So he fell and he couldn't really catch himself and he really kind of messed himself up. And he called me and he says, you know what, Rob? I had to have my girlfriend, I'm not going to name her because somebody may know her on here. I had to have my girlfriend come over and help me take a shower and help me put my pants on. He says, because I want you to try to put your pants on tonight or tomorrow and pretend your arm is in a sling. And you're 63 years old. He goes, it's not very easy. And so this is something that a lot of people face as they get older, whether they get hurt or just something goes wrong in their health. And a lot of times we don't think about it until it's too late, or we think our insurance, our health care is going to cover this stuff. It's often associated with older people. But again, I've got some stories and things that we can share with you. This can happen to anybody at any time, an accident, an illness, an injury. So again, we've got to have a plan to address, well, what do we do if we get sick like this? This is some of the scary stuff on page 74. You can fill this in the workbook. I'll pull up all the numbers so you can write it if you're doing it. But the numbers are staggering. If you've ever dealt with a family member who's had to deal with any sort of care facility, the costs are, I mean, it's very scary for families who say, hey, I'm behind on my savings. I'm still in debt. A lot of people say, well, no, Rob, my friend is getting taken care of by the government. Oh, I understand. Those people are probably on what's called Medicaid. They have no assets. They don't have anything. You have to be in very like poverty situation for that to be the government taken care of. If you've got a home, you've got, 50 grand in savings, 100 grand in savings, and you're 65 years old. It's not a lot of money. It's a lot of money, not a lot of money. Depending on how you look at it, you ain't getting on Medicaid, not in that situation. And that's not a great situation. So these numbers are real. My parents, I still have, my dad is around, who's 75 years old. His girlfriend is 80 years old. She's going like a rock star. And my mom and my stepdad. And so I think about this personally because they're across the country. And I think, well, what if they need help? The cost of this is scary. So we've got to have a plan for this. And it wipes out a lot of families because they don't have a plan. And so some misconceptions, okay? It says when buying a life insurance policy with long-term care, there's like hybrid policies nowadays. Is it possible to qualify for life insurance but not long-term care? That is a true statement. You may not qualify for both. Again, the average cost of this thing being over $83,000, who's going to pay for it? If you've got retirement savings, it could deplete it pretty quickly. And I've seen it happen to a few people. Some risk here of developing Alzheimer's, again, because by the way, the reason we share some of this, because our movement, our education, our mindset, our passion is about health and wealth. I've been saying to people for a few months now, I feel like we're wealth care workers, because I'm not a healthcare worker. I've never been trained in any of that, but I feel like we are wealth care workers, but there's an overlap with health and wellness and all this stuff. If you look at the risk of developing Alzheimer's disease, 65 is 1 in 9 and 85 is 1 in 3. My dad's mom had this, and I showed up at her door one day and I knocked and she said, "Who are you?" And I was like, what the heck, and it's if you've dealt with that, you know what I'm talking about. It's really tough for people to deal with. If you have very few assets and you live on Social Security benefits, you got a little bit of money, but you live on Social Security, should you maybe consider having long-term care? The answer is yes. You may have to set that up. The call we had today, the lady we spoke to today, 65 years old, she says, "No, I thought Medicare covers that." And we go, "Oh my gosh, no." So again, we need the education. It's a big thing for us to understand. So let's get into this Medicare stuff. And you guys, again, I'm going to go quick because I can confuse people. I am going to hit the points. We are going to fill in the workbook. I primarily want to cover this, and I want to get to the estate planning, and I want to end on time just out of respect for everybody's schedule. But again, if you have a Medicare question for you, a family, a friend, just even your own personal data, please, please, please get with us. Because again, I don't want to lose anybody in the weeds here when we talk about Medicare, Medicaid, and long-term care. There's some intertwining of these two, okay? So Medicare will cover long-term care up to 100 days. So you need help? Oh, yeah. The government's got your back for 100 days. Medicaid will cover long-term care, but like I said a moment ago, has very strict income and asset requirements. You usually have to lose your assets. The county, I think it's called Santa Cruz County, Nogales, Arizona. I received a call from someone down there, and they said, "Hey, this is the Medicaid office. We have a client who has $25,000 and she cannot have the money. We need that money to go into an account in the name of the state of Arizona." And I tell you guys, I had to cooperate to help the state because they said, "You have a license, you need to do this." And it was a situation where I saw the state say, "Oh, you want to get on Medicaid? You can't have this money. You have to lose those assets." And so that's the reality check for a lot of people that they're not aware of. And some people say, "Well, I'll give it to my kid. I'll give it to my whatever." No, you won't, because they're smarter than that. They look back. I believe it's a 5-year window right now. And so we've got to have some things in mind. Long-term care insurance is something that we have to get set up. It is to cover the medical and non-medical care. So that's something that we have to get set up. We have to have a plan to get that in place. So Medicare in general is going to be your health insurance in the United States once you turn 65, unless you are still covered by your employer's health insurance. Okay, so if you still have you're 65, 66, still working, still covered by that plan, you can stay on that. You don't need to do the Medicare stuff quite yet. If you're not on that plan, you got to get into Medicare situation. That's going to be how it works. And you must be on Medicare before you can get what's called Medicare supplements, which we're going to talk about very briefly. So on page 75, there's 4 parts. This is where it's going to get confusing because the government built it. Okay, I used to work for them. I can tell you it's very confusing. Part A of Medicare is medical insurance for hospital visits, and it is free for most people. I actually would say that is a lie. It is not free. If you work right now, look at your payroll or your tax return, you pay for Medicare right now, so it is not free. When you're 65, Medicare Part A is free. So you pay for it now and you don't pay for it later. It's not free though. Part B is to go see the doctor. It's not free. 2020, that amount, $144.60. It's pretty reasonable. You're 65, 75 years old. Pretty good. 144 bucks. You can go see your doctor. It's pretty good. So you would think after A and B would come Part C, but we're going to throw the curveball at you here. We're going to jump right to Part D as in David for drug coverage. I guess they wanted to make it simple, put D after B. That's super simple. And then after D, we would jump back into Part C, which is what's called Medicare Advantage, which includes Part A, B, and D. So effectively, Medicare Part C includes all of those. Why they did it like that, I have no clue, but it confuses a lot of us. So applying for Medicare through Social Security, there's 2 enrollment periods, and this stuff is actually really important. Probably the most important part of the Medicare stuff in my mind. There's the initial enrollment period, which is a span of 7 months, 3 months before and 3 months after your birthday, your 65th birthday. Okay, that's what's called the initial enrollment period. There is then what's called the special enrollment period. So let's say you're covered by your job. Well, you could sign up right away or within 8 months after your group coverage ends. By the way, this is a hard deadline, you guys. Like, this is not a joke. This is what I call, and by the way, forgive me for being derogatory in any way. I don't mean it. I'm a military guy. What we call screw and tattoo. I don't know if you ever heard that terminology. You ever been screwed and tattooed? The government likes to do that. I'm getting texts all of a sudden right here. If you don't sign up at the right time for Medicare, here's what it, at the bottom of the screen, it says late enrollment penalties will be assessed. Here's what it means, you guys. You pay more for the remainder of your life because you signed up late and you were supposed to know. That's crazy to me. I asked my dad, hey, Pops, did you know? He goes, no, nobody taught me anything about this. So again, this is important for us. Again, if you've got someone, we've got to educate them. If they're really close to this, we've got to make sure they're doing it at the right time. Okay, so general enrollment period, January 1 to March 31. Let's go to the workbook real quick. It says if your birthday, page 75, if your birthday is in the month of May, when is your initial enrollment period? My answer in the workbook says C, February to August. And again, the initial enrollment period in the workbook, January 1 to March 31. We're going to answer the question and we're going to go on. Say you're 65 and you're still working and you have health insurance from your company. You terminate that job in May. When is the window for your special enrollment period? The answer is May to November, that 8-month period. Okay? And again, after signing up for Part A and B, you may have to sign up for Part D, which covers drugs, prescriptions. A lot of people are on drugs and prescriptions, and so that's a big one. Okay. Then there is a part called Medicare Supplement, which often is referred to as Medigap insurance. It fills in the gaps. That's the easiest thing to understand. And it will cover you if you some of these other things, because if you think about it, Medicare doesn't cover your deductibles, co-pays, and if you leave the country. So let's say you go to Mexico, you go to Rocky Point, you go somewhere, you may need Medicare supplements to supplement that coverage, okay? Medicare Supplement, however, doesn't cover long-term care, dental, vision, hearing, eyeglasses. So the reason we share this, you guys, is there's a lot of costs, healthcare costs that all of us have in the future. And we need to have a strategy to minimize the bleeding, okay? Excuse me. Give me a second here. So I'm not choking. The basic benefits are standardized, which is really important. So at the end of the day, you guys, we tell people to buy the cheapest plan. If you go to Mutual of Omaha or ABC, XYZ, buy the cheapest one because the benefits are regulated by the government. So you should really buy the cheapest one. That's what it's about. They got to give you the same benefits. Okay. Page 77 is a Medicare supplement plan little guide. However, there are some changes to it. Okay. There's a lot of changes going on in this world. But again, we want you just to have a little quick reference guide for you to maybe view here. Let me go on. well, actually, why don't we answer the rest of these questions, and then we're going to jump to the estate planning stuff, and we're going to wrap up. It's the top of page 76, you guys. It says Medicare supplement pays for basic dental and vision. The answer is false. It does not. You're going to have to pay for that. Medicare benefits of Medicare supplement differ from one company to the next. That is actually false. Like we said, they're standardized. They've got to be the same. Which Medicare supplement provides the most coverage? The technical answer in the workbook, you guys, is Plan F, C, but it's discontinued, so that's no longer true. And so again, the technical answer is C, but the appropriate answer moving forward would actually be Plan G right now. Okay, I know that's changing for people. Just to make sure we get all these lines filled in, because I want to go on. It says, when it comes to Medicare insurance, if you think of PPO versus HMO, do you guys know the difference in the two? Like on the screen, it says HMO, you go to an in-network doctor who they want. That would be Medicare Advantage. HMO is Medicare in the network. The PPO is you could go to anybody you want on the Medicare supplement. So it's important to understand. Some people say, I want to go to a certain doctor, a certain facility or whatever. They need to understand it may or may not be covered on that plan. And which typically costs more? The answer is Medicare supplement, okay? I know some of you, because I could care less about Medicare, I'm far away from it. So I'm going to click through this because we just said all that stuff. So page 76 as well, we'll fill this in regarding retiree healthcare costs. Again, some depressing data. The average lifetime retirement healthcare cost for a 65-year-old couple, $285,000. Some people start chuckling when they hear it. The point is, I want to just show you the total cost when they factor in everything, including dental, vision, copay. It's $400,000. And I'm thinking, there's no way in the world. So our health is extremely important, and our wealth is pretty important. But your wealth isn't worth anything without your health. And so I really think this stuff works together. We need to keep these costs down and do our part. So again, rethinking this the best we can, okay? So let's just do the yes and no at the bottom of page 76, and we're going to wrap up. It says, can you get Medicare supplement coverage while retiring and living overseas? That is yes, you can with the Medicare supplement. Will Medicare Advantage cover you if you travel outside of the network or the state? The answer is it depends. Really, it does depend on the plan. And do all Medicare Advantage plans have the same coverage like Medigap? That is no. Okay, let's go on. Really quick area we like to talk about is your real estate. Some people have a big house, and I'm not for it. I think we have someone on the call that they have 10 children. I mean, it's exciting. It's so cool. And you probably need a big house, but a lot of people, like my brother, who I love to death, has this giant house, just him and his wife. And what people realize as they get closer to retirement, many times they regret it. So, one of the things here, it says, do you still need that? So just thinking about it, easier for upkeep, lower maintenance, closer to the doctor. There's a lot of reasons. I don't necessarily think you need to write those down, but it's just something we ask a lot of young people, especially, to think about as they're buying a house. Do you really need this big house? Some people get a little bit carried away with it. And again, just something to think about as you're getting older, okay? So the subject we are going to end on, and an important subject, is what's called estate planning. I don't know if anybody here has any positive or negative experience with it, but I'll tell you, it usually is a negative experience that most people experience when it comes to estate planning. What is it? What is estate planning? It is the process of determining the distribution of your assets upon your death. Nobody wants to talk about it, but I'm going to pass away. And so I want a plan. I don't want that money. I don't want stuff to get lost or whatever. So it's a plan. It also covers the management of what's called your professional affairs. What if you have an accident? What if you're in a hospital? What if your family member has to make a decision for you? And I know all of us are thinking, oh yeah, that's not going to happen to me. I know. We've all said it. But I tell you, I know a lot of people that it's happening to. I know a lot of people that have passed away recently. I know a lot of people that are going through a crisis in one way or another right now with this stuff. And so we've got to have a plan. One thing I want to point out in the workbook is on page 79 and 80 here on the screen. you know what? I really like page 79 and 80. I want you to read those. I really would like you to read those because it goes through what is a will? What is a trust? Do I need a will? You need to get a little bit of basics on that. So there's a lot of great bullet points in there. For the sake of me not trying to read to you through two paragraphs here, I'm not going to do that. I don't do that even in the live classes. I really recommend you read 79 and 80 for homework, okay? But what is an estate? It's everything you own minus what you owe. So if I came into your world and you were no longer in it, and I took everything you own, including your iPhone and your personal belongings and your jewelry and your furniture, and I sold it all at a market value, and I then paid off all the debt, how much would be left? Because that is your estate. A lot of people, they start laughing. They go, hey man, my estate is zero. I don't have nothing. And I say, well, I don't know if I'd be bragging about that. That's nothing to be proud of in the richest country in the world, where there's more knowledge than anywhere in the world. That's nothing to be proud of. Everybody has an estate. And so I don't care if it's, $50. We got to have a plan for it. And so everything you own is included in this. So therefore you need a plan. So page 81, let's go through this little worksheet, okay? Help you with the bullet points. It says, to ensure my property go to whom I choose when I die, I can make a simple will. Everybody needs a will. You should have a will, especially if you have kids, especially if you have a family. If you're single, that doesn't mean you don't, but everybody needs to do it. Most people with kids, it's got to be a high priority. You got to get on top of this stuff. Number two, to avoid what's called probate. Some people say, what the heck is probate? Probate is the process of the government saying, oh my gosh, Tony, you didn't have a plan and you own real estate and you have children and you have a 401k and you have all this stuff and you don't have a plan and you died without a trust. The government says, we have a plan for you. And that is called probate. And that is when they determine how it will go. And by the way, there's a lot of expenses and costs that the family will pay when you go to probate. By the way, if you want to learn about probate, you should look into the musician Prince, Purple Rain, Party Like It's 1999 guy. That family lost, I believe it's like 60% of all the assets when he died. It's unbelievable. Some of the stories of Prince, Heath Ledger, Marilyn Monroe, Joe Robbie, the former owner of the Miami Dolphins, Elvis Presley. There's so many celebrities that just, Robin Williams, these people died without it. And the family really got in a bad spot. I'm sure they're okay, but it's not the best spot, okay? Number three, I would not want my family to try to have to make decisions for me so I can fill out what's called advanced directives. I can put that in writing in a digital vault or something like this, or in a file cabinet, and say, you know what? If something happens to me, here's what I want. I don't want my family to have to make that decision. Imagine the pressure of your spouse in a bad accident or something, and the doctor saying, hey, they're going to be on life support for the rest of their life. What do you want us to do? I don't want to be in that decision. It would be a heartbreaking thing in general, let alone to have that on your heart in that sort of time. No way, no thanks. Number four, I can give an authority to a trusted person to manage my accounts if I'm unable by signing what's called a power of attorney. Maybe you can't sign, you're unable, someone can sign on your behalf. That might be a good thing to have in place. Number five, to protect my children, I will name a legal guardian. And by the way, please let the guardian know about it. I was named someone's legal guardian and they didn't even tell me about it. I was kind of pissed about that, They should have told me. I'll be there, but they should have told me. Okay. Number six, to make sure all of my investment accounts, I should say all my accounts, bank accounts included, go to the person I specify, I can update and register my beneficiary. Guys, please make sure you have a beneficiary on every account that has money in it. Please do that for your family. Checking accounts included. Your spouse cannot get to your checking account if they're not on there. Some people say, no, that's not true. Okay, good luck. Please make sure you have this stuff, and please make sure it's updated, not your ex-boyfriend or something like that. Number seven, to protect my children, their education, and cover my debt, I will evaluate the correct amount of life insurance. That's part of an estate plan, big part of it, okay? You gotta protect your family. Number eight, this is a little bit out of date because it is not 1 million, but there's a rule called estate taxes. depending on how much your estate is valued at, you could potentially face up to 50% of a tax rate when you die. Again, it's a lot of, you got to have a lot of money to pay that, but people need to know it's aware, but it is not 1 million anymore. I can direct a portion of my life insurance proceeds to go to pay for my final expenses, burial, cremation, funeral, things like that. You should have that pre-allocated. I don't want my family to have to figure that out. You can have it done ahead of time, you guys. A lot of peace of mind when you have this done, by the way. You can sleep at night. You go, you know what? I'm not so worried. At least if you're worried, you're not worried about this stuff. And number 10, to ensure everything is handled according to my wishes, keep everything in a safe place. Please, please, please. A safe set of instructions for your family where they know what to do. A couple more. If I own a business, you need what's called a succession plan. And if you have a business partner, you potentially need what's called a buyout agreement. If you die, what happens to the business? If you die and you have a partner, what happens to the business? These are arrangements that people need to make. And I don't care if it's a two-person business, they need to have that in place. And number 12, again, everything in a safe place. We recommend digital vaults and very secure places nowadays you can secure and store all of your data. So anyway, I'm gonna click through a few slides and we're gonna wrap up, you guys. Some did you know bullet points. By the way, I have a little timer set and I've got 8 minutes and 55 seconds left. So I feel like I'm doing okay. So if you wonder, we're on time. Did you know if you leave your assets to your child and the child is a minor, the court will appoint a guardian that will take care of the assets as well as the kid? I mean, if you don't take care of it, that scares the heck out of me. And the kid will get all the money when they're 18. That might be even worse. The kid pull up in a Maserati or something, you know what I mean? And if you don't have a plan, I'm here to tell you, the government does have one for you. You probably may not like it. You may not like it when you think about you and your spouse pay into Social Security from the very first paycheck you ever got. You both pay. When one person passes away, the survivor gets one of the two accounts. Where does the other account go? It goes to the government. And you may not like that plan, but that's the plan. And so that's why the education of this stuff is like, what? I didn't know that. So hopefully you had maybe one or two aha moments as we talk about this stuff. If you have children and you're remarried and you die, the assets go to the current spouse, not the kids. And the serving step-parent has no obligation. One quick story. I know I've been saying that all day, all night. One of our associates here, Ed and I, we were in Sierra Vista. We met with a gentleman who, I don't remember the exact numbers, but his father was dealing with a real illness, I believe called mesothelioma, some sort of respiratory illness, I believe is what it was. And he went through like some sort of lawsuit settlement, and he got like, $500,000, $1 million, $2 million, like a lot of money, something like that. He gets married. He gets remarried because he's not married. His kids, who are adult children in their late 40s, 50s, things like that, they're thinking, okay, everything's good. My dad's got this money. He's got a new wife, no problem. Dad dies. Those kids got no money. The new wife got all of the money, and the kicker of it is he told us, he goes, her kids got some of the money when she died, and the real children. So again, the point is, you guys, we've experienced this stuff, and sometimes the actual family, because of the legal system, gets cut out. Not cool. So you have a responsibility. You really do have a responsibility. There's no excuse. We have more technology at our fingertips with Zoom and YouTube and all this stuff. There's no excuse. So you have a responsibility to plan ahead. And the best time is now, maybe during a COVID pandemic. You know what I mean? Maybe we get some certainty coming out of this thing. So anyway, when you travel, quickly have a power of attorney. Have these things in place, you guys, when you're traveling, especially a child consent. If you're not with maybe one of the parents, we know there's a lot of single parents or, co-parenting situations. And so there's things that a lot of families overlook. And it really messes up a lot of people's situations. So things to think about just in case. It's peace of mind. Okay. I've already said all of that. One of the things I want to share in the middle of the screen, it says, one of the greatest miracles in life is you can change your life simply by changing the way you think. I'll tell you, I feel like I'm a product of that statement, of people challenging my thinking and people challenging the way I think for the past 20 years. And so, again, I don't know your situation. I know there's probably some people on here I've never met. And all I'm challenging you when it comes to your money and your future and your spending habits and all this stuff, you've got to think differently. You've got to think more optimistic and positively, because people are freaking out right now. And I go, man, when the world is in crisis, you should be confident. You should have certainty, because the reality is things are gonna be about how they've always been around here. We're gonna make it through this. And I think we just need to have the mindset of coming out on the positive side rather than the negative side. And so there's a lot of great opportunities. So we're going to end on page 82, and I would like you to fill this in if you're writing as we summarize. Okay, have a plan of action, you guys. This is, I'm flapping at the gums if that's all this is. If there's no plan, you don't do anything, you don't behave differently. And again, I know it's a ton of info. And if it's your first workshop, I apologize. This is probably like the worst place to jump in. It's all good because they're all independent, but it's very content heavy. The other workshops are not so content heavy, okay? Number one, increase your cash flow. We've talked about this a lot. Make more money. Have a secondary source of income. If you have some curiosity, we can help you do that in the financial industry. We can help you in the education industry. If you want to go do DoorDash or Uber or sell real estate, I'm okay with that. But you should try to focus on increasing your cash flow. Take your television time and double your income. Take your television time and save for your kids' college. I mean, I don't know. Find a way to increase your cash flow. Number two, spend less and save more. I'm spending way less eating out. I'm spending way less on gas the past few weeks. It's awesome. Things I didn't think I could cut back on. I go, man, I'm really doing it. So get your budget in place, you guys. Get more savings. Use the time. Number three, reduce your debt and liabilities. We talked about that all in workshop number one. You've got to get out of debt. It's like Dumb and Dumber. It's working against you, okay? You can do it, by the way. No matter what it is, you can do it. If you think you can or think you can't, either way, you're right. Number four, you got to understand how money works, and you got to become more of your own money manager. That's the problem. People let other people manage it. They're in the dark. You got to know more, and maybe you can do more. That's the goal of this thing, okay? Number five, we suggest you have a clear financial goal and build a solid financial foundation. In 2020, what we have left of it, in the miracle of 2020 that is left, what is your financial goal? Can you tell me? Can you tell me so clear that I would get excited about it and actually believe it's going to happen? Because most people, they're very vague. Oh, I want to save money. Just like, oh, I want to lose weight. Oh, I want to raise my kids. There's no specificity. So get a very clear goal. I think that's one of the miracles of getting clarity, is you can actually have things to focus on, okay? And number six, have a life of purpose. This doesn't have anything to do with financial education, but it has everything to do with life. Have a life of purpose. Maybe you leave a legacy. Maybe you leave something for the future, okay? And number seven, embrace change. The world is changing in ways we would have never thought in the world. We're doing all of our meetings on Zoom and stuff like this. You've got to expect to get ahead. Here's a few tips. Change your habits. Stop doing the same stuff. Expect to win. Get up, get out. Stop being so afraid. If you're worried about the virus, if you've got health issues, I get it. But I tell you, some people are going to live their life operating under fear. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I'm just saying change your habits. Get up, get out. Expect to succeed. Expect good things to happen. Expect to be able to build up your emergency savings. And most importantly, have fun. Find something you believe in and put your life to fight for it. So I'm passionate about this stuff, you guys. I hope there was some value in the workshop for you tonight. Again, I know this is a ton of information, and I feel like I'm obligated to go fast through it because of the material. There is some homework, okay? I guess I should share my screen because I didn't pull it on the screen. So give me a second to go back and give you your homework reading assignment before I forget. If you have a blue book, if not, the most important thing, you guys, is the reading. It says pages 48 to 50 and 68 to 86. It really helps tie all this together. Again, if you need help, get with your trainer, get with the person that invited you. If you need help from me, I'm here. All of our associates are here to help. If you feel that you know of someone that can benefit from this stuff, again, please let us know. We are recording these. And so after tonight, we'll have the first 4 workshops on demand. And so, people can kind of attend them anytime they want. We'll have just a private link. We can share that with you. And next week, we will begin workshop 5. Some people who have a PDF of the workbook, they don't have workshop 5. If you have a physical book, you do. You have a workshop 5 section. We are going to get the PDF for you. However, we took it out because of the context. Workshop number 5, we're going to break it into 2 meetings. So it's going to be a Thursday and another Thursday in the same workshop because it's a lot of information. Because what we're going to cover is the financial industry, the mechanics of it. Where does all that money go? And I tell you, as people really start to learn this stuff, they start to ask better questions. And we really like to show the transparency of that and what we feel we're doing in that regard. So again, Workshop 5 is an elective course for the financial literacy part. So if you say, hey, I'm tuning in tonight for the first time and I'm not really interested in all that, that's okay. You don't need to tune in for Workshop 5. We just want to probably circle back around and get you on the first 4. Again, before we end, you can unmute. We can take a minute to ask questions. If not, I know some people are always feeling uncomfortable asking questions in a public setting. We're here after the fact. I'll take a 30-second pause break. If you have a question, unmute. If not, God bless. Have a great night. I appreciate you guys coming here, and hopefully you took something of value. And my timer is buzzing at me. So, if you have questions, we're here. If not, rock on. God bless America. Happy Friday tomorrow. Okay. I got some thumbs up and stuff like that. That's about it. Well, hey, listen, you guys, I appreciate it. Again, get with the person that invited you. Ask questions. You got to know this stuff. I know it may be the first time hearing it. Don't be discouraged. Don't be intimidated. You can do it. Simple education, simple things, okay? God bless you. Have a good night. We'll see you guys. Be safe. Wash your hands. Talk to you all very soon, okay?
All right.
Good night. Bye.